Because, guys, to me, they are so superior. I mean, beyond so superior than the opponents they've played so far that I'm not used to it. I'm not used to the superiority, like, coming out of the chute like this.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky. We've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The Pond Lehocky Eagles Postgame Show live at the Ocean Casino. You're watching us on 6abc.com or the JAKIB Sports YouTube network. I'm Mike Missinelli. It's Derek Gunn, and that's Seth Joyner. And the Eagles with a 24-8 win over the Washington Commanders today. Again, a dominant performance in the second quarter. They piled up enough points to really go into the second half. And I know a lot of people are upset about them not really closing out the deal and scoring in the second half. But to me, you know, I thought that the Eagles' mindset was we have this team beat. Maybe they let a little up on the gas. But let's just talk about this team because, guys, to me, they are so superior. I mean, beyond so superior than the opponents they've played so far that I'm not used to it. I'm not used to the superiority, like, coming out of the chute like this.
They almost make it look too easy at times. And you're right. Up until this point, the last two games in a span of 6 days, it's been almost like a practice game for them. Whatever a team tries to counter with, they have a counter proposal for them, and 9 times out of 10, it works. And this is a good measuring gauge to set the stage for what's to come when they do play a little bit better competition. Now, the only thing is I want to see is when it gets down to a gunfight in the fourth quarter, how will they respond when things are not so easy? We haven't seen that yet. Now, we saw it briefly in the first game, but we haven't really seen it over the last couple of weeks yet. But if they can stay healthy with what they have right now and what's working for them right now, I like their chances against anybody in the NFC right now.
Well, listen, you know, we can talk about whether they've been tested or not. I always say that the only thing that you can do is play the teams that are on your schedule. When you look at the schedule, yeah, they beat the Lions. They beat the Vikings. They beat the Commanders. They got the Jaguars coming in here next week. They'll probably beat the Jaguars. And then things get a little tougher. They got to travel to Arizona. Then they come back home, and they've got the Cowgirls on Monday night. Huge game, or Sunday night, I think it is. I think those two games will be the toughest two games that they'll have through the first 6 games of the season. But these games, to me, are primers. These are games that they should win.
Yes.
And I think they're learning about themselves. The coordinators are learning about the players. The players are learning about the coordinators, how they want to call plays. And as you continue through, you know, next week, when you get through that fourth game, and you got 4 game films, like I talked about earlier. If I got 4 game films to break you down, now this is where the rubber really begins to meet the road when we get to week 5. You know, when they go to Arizona, you're going to have plenty of game film to dissect what they're doing. Nothing's going to be a surprise to you. Nothing's going to be a surprise to them. This is when the season really starts. But it's always good to start off 4-5-0 if you can start off 4-5-0.
Listen, the beauty of the situation is, if you look at what Devonte Smith did today, we're talking about 169 yards receiving for Devonte Smith. It goes back and forth. A.J. Brown start one week, Devonte Smith the next, and they're just like they have that kind of attack and Goddard is unguardable. So when you're talking about putting those 3 guys into play, they've really never had that kind of a situation in recent years.
Well, I mean, they've been dominant at one position, you know, for a long time. That's been tight end. They've been, you know, have some dominance in the running game, but they haven't had the dominance on the outside. You know, and everyone complained about, Devonte Smith didn't get any catches, no catches in the first game. Well, you knew this was coming, and this is the beauty of this offense, is that you have so many weapons across the board. It was almost, it's when I look at this team, what it takes me back to, and I'm not saying that they're going to be this, I'm not saying that they're in that position yet, but what it takes me back to is the Super Bowl year. And when they got to the Super Bowl, I had begun to do a whole bunch of national shows leading up to the Super Bowl. And everybody called me a homer because I was picking the Eagles to win the game. Oh, they can't beat Bill Belichick. They can't beat Tom Brady. And you know what I said? I was like, listen, what is it that that Bill Belichick is greatest at? Bill Belichick is greatest at taking away what you do best and making you beat him with what you do least. And I said, that's not going to work with this Eagles team. I said, take away Zach Ertz. Guess what you got? You got Alshon Jeffrey. You got Corey Clement. You got all these other weapons. There's only one weapon you can take away at a time. You can't take them all away. When I look at this football team, it's a similar situation. You got 3 able backs. You got 2-3 able tight ends, and you got 3 different wide receivers, and then throw Zach Pascal in the mix. You got 4 wide receivers that can start at any time. So when teams are game planning, how do you game plan for this team?
And by the way, Grant Calcaterra gets some PT today.
Yeah.
He gets a 40-yard
We have like
catch.
a 40-yard catch.
How about your first catch in the NFL going for 40 yards?
Yes. So this is all good stuff. Now, defensively, obviously, we saw what we saw. They were dominant defensively against a quarterback that I think is on the way to journeymanville. But straight rush, and they got pressure on him. 9 sacks. Brandon Graham, 2.5. Cox, a sack and a half. Sweat, a sack and a half. Hargrave got one. T.J. Edwards got one late. And Hassan Reddick gets a sack and a half. And we've been waiting for that.
Well, listen, it was open season, on Carson Wentz today. You knew that he was going to try to hold on to the ball to buy some time to try to hit stuff downfield. And in doing so, against an inferior offensive line, their game plan should have been, hey, let's just go quick game. Let's get it out. Let's get it out of his hand, so they can't get there. But, listen, these things come in bunches. They're like turnovers. Sacks sometimes are like turnovers. They come in bunches. You get them at different spurts at different times of the game. And listen, Hassan Reddick is too good of a pass rusher, to go through 2 games like he went through earlier. But then again, if you look at the history of his sacks and how he gets them, they come in bunches. There was one game where he had 4 or 5. When he had double-digit sacks one of those years, there was one game where he had 4 or 5 sacks in one game alone. But yet and still, what are we talking about? Oh, he had double-digit sacks. So let's just pump our brakes. He's going to have his highs and his lows. He's going to do some really good things, and then there's going to be some games where he just doesn't. He's not going to show up.
So let me ask you guys this. Since we're talking about Hassan Reddick, were you content with this performance today or satisfied?
Oh, I was just satisfied. I like that he got something on the board. I'll take that for right now. But he hasn't obviously been a dominant pass rusher so far for whatever reason. They're not putting him in the right spot or whatever. But I thought he showed a little bit more life to that.
Okay.
I think it's situations. I will stand on the soapbox and I will say, pressures are one thing. You put him in the five-man look, and 9 times out of 10, he's going to be the drop guy because he's primarily the guy that possesses the skill set to drop into coverage and be a flat player. Now, I've seen BG do it a couple of times, but BG, like he said, he gained about 20 pounds during his rehab process. And he's in year 13, so I'm not asking him to drop in the flat as much as I would a guy like Hassan Reddick. So you kind of understand the mentality and the thinking when you're in that position and you want to show 5-man, but you want to drop. He's going to be the guy. So you got to be happy that yes, he got on the board, but you know that potentially there's so much more there, and they've got to get better in how they utilize it. Line him up in a traditional 4-man front. And instead of just having just every single time running, just trying to speed rush, do some ETs, some TE stunts with him. Figure out a way where you can, start him off in 5-man, slide him back off the line in a 3-linebacker off the ball look and send him with games, with the tackles, with the ends, whatever it is that you want to do. But you got to figure out creative ways to implement him in what you're trying to do rather than what they're just doing. He's either lined up on the edge and he's coming in 5-man, or he's lined up, a defensive end in the 4-man and he's coming, or he's lined up in 5-man and he's dropping. There's not a whole lot of mystery there.
So your answer falls into the category of content for today?
Yeah, because listen, when you sign a guy to a contract like that, the expectations are for much, much more. Okay, but he went through the first 2 games with none. He got 1.5 today. Yep. I'm content for now.
Okay,
yeah, and the complaints were they were dropping him too much in coverage, and you're not going to get the best out of him. You know, it was an underrated defensive play in this game that we hadn't talked about yet. Devonte Maddox.
Oh yeah,
stuffing the 4th and goal there. Oh my goodness! And now they got a 2-run homer to get on the board, put their deuce on the board. But still, that was a good play.
No question about it. And you know what? Devonte Maddox is like the unsung hero of the secondary. You know, he's the guy who does a lot of the dirty work but doesn't get a lot of the accolades. We always talk about the Bradbury, Slay, Gardner Johnson. You know, those are the big name guys. But all Devonte Maddox does is make plays. And that play he made at the goal line was a momentum changer. I mean, he went low and took out a guy who was about 6-7 inches taller than him and about 40-50 pounds heavier than him, and he stopped him dead in his tracks.
Listen, I don't want to pile on here with Carson Wentz, but I think I will, because it was painful for me to watch him. It really was. And I loathe bad quarterback play in the NFL. You see an awful lot of bad quarterback play. But it was like a juxtaposition of what made us disgruntled with him, where we were so annoyed that he held the ball. We were so annoyed that he didn't protect the ball. And that's what we saw today.
Well, there hasn't been a whole lot of change. And I just want to say this before we move on. I've heard there are people who are really smart in this game have said to me that Devonte Maddox, I don't think we really understand how good he is, okay? And if he could just acquire some statistics, if he could get some interceptions, if he could, if he could fill the stat box, then he would be a Pro Bowl slot corner. The problem is he does such a good job, they don't really attack him that much, okay? So now, I digress. I'll go back to Carson Wentz.
I'm glad you got that point in. Now, go back.
Carson,
I'm like, where's he going?
Go back to Carson.
The issue with Carson is, Carson just some guys just never learn. They're like the Little Rascals. The Little Rascals say they never learn. It seems to me like it never registers. I felt like when Nick Foles took over this team and took it to the Super Bowl, and then he came back and started the first 4 games, the thing that I wish for the most guys is I wish that Carson could step back and look at how Nick Foles operated as the leader of the team and learn something from it. And he never did. I think there was still more resentment from that situation than his ability to look at what was there that he could glean from that situation and learn from that would help him going forward. Then Nick Foles moves on, and now he's the guy, and he knows that he's the guy in full power. And he never really got it and understood that when you're the quarterback, you have to endear yourself to everyone on the roster, not just a couple of guys on the offense, not just a couple of guys on the defense, but everyone. And then from a playing perspective, I seen him in a game where he threw 3 interceptions, stand up at the post-game podium and say, hey, I'm just going to keep, I'm going to keep taking my shots. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to change anything. You're not going to change anything? Dude, you just threw 3 interceptions. Are you crazy?
I was hiding my eyes, like doctor my eyes.